Hello, and welcome to History at Nightfall. Tonight, I'm taking you back to a cold and misty Christmas night in 1992. Deep in the quiet, snow-covered countryside of England, snow was falling gently under the dim streetlights. The narrow stone streets were silent, and inside a house that looked perfectly ordinary from the outside, something truly unsettling was unfolding. But before we begin, if you take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, it may be a small gesture for you, but it truly means the world to me. Your support helps me bring more calm, dark, and atmospheric stories like this one straight to you. Now, if you're ready, leave the weight of the day behind. Take a slow, deep breath, and allow your mind to drift as we begin our quiet journey into history's darker corners. This story is based on a real Christmas case, one recorded in the archives, whispered about for decades. So settle in, relax your shoulders, and let's step together into the cold night of 1992, where silence, snow, and something far more disturbing were waiting. And so, our story begins. As we drift back to that winter of 1992, the first thing you'll notice is the sound. Or rather, the absence of it. A soft blanket of snow covered the English countryside, muting every distant footstep, every passing car, every whisper of the wind. It was the kind of silence that only comes once a year on those deep Christmas nights, when the world seems to fall asleep all at once. In the small village of Harrowfield, a place tucked between rolling hills and old stone roads, warm lights glowed behind frosted windows. Families were settling into their Christmas routines, hanging stockings, stirring hot chocolate, wrapping last-minute gifts by the fireside. Everything felt peaceful, still, safe. But on the far edge of that village, behind a narrow lane lined with bare trees, stood a modest two-story house, the home of the Thompson family. To anyone passing by, their home looked just like all the others. A gentle smoke curled from the chimney. The porch light flickered warmly, and a Christmas wreath hung neatly on the door. Yet inside that quiet house, something had already begun. James Thompson, the father, was finishing the final touches on the Christmas tree, adjusting a silver ornament here, fixing a string of lights there. Lavra, his wife, was folding freshly washed blankets for their 7-year-old daughter, Ellie, who was upstairs in her room, drawing snowmen on construction paper and humming old Christmas songs. It was an ordinary, peaceful night, the kind of night meant for rest, comfort, and soft memories to look back on years later. Nobody in that home, not James, not Laura, not little Ellie, knew that within just a few hours, their Christmas calm would be shaken by something they could never have imagined. Because while they moved through their evening routines, somewhere out in the darkness, a phone line crackled, a number was dialed, a call began to ring. And that was when the first small ripple in their perfect Christmas night appeared. But of course, they didn't know that yet. All they felt was the gentle warmth of the fireplace, the comforting smell of pine, and the soft glow of the tree lights, dancing on the living room walls. And as they settled deeper into the quiet of that evening, the snow outside continued to fall, covering the entire village in a silent white veil, a veil hiding secrets, footsteps, and something waiting just beyond the edge of their awareness. The evening drifted forward gently, as if time itself was reluctant to disturb, the delicate quiet hanging over the house. James stepped back from the Christmas tree, tilting his head slightly, examining the soft flicker of the lights. As they reflected off silver tinsel, the ornaments swayed almost imperceptibly, tiny glass spheres catching and releasing, glimmers of warm gold. Lavra placed the folded blankets on the sofa, running her hand slowly across the fabric, as though smoothing out the very air around her. Upstairs, Ellie's soft humming floated down the staircase, a small, innocent sound that added just a touch of life to the otherwise still night. And then, from the far corner of the room, a phone began to ring. It cut through the silence gently, not suddenly, not alarmingly, but in a way that felt unexpected, as though the house itself was surprised to hear it. James lifted his head. Lavra paused mid-step. They exchanged a quiet glance. A wordless, who could that be? Spoken only with their eyes. The ringing continued, steady, patient. James crossed the living room, his footsteps soft against the carpet. He picked up the phone, pressed it gently to his ear. "Hello?" His voice was calm, casual, but what came back was not a voice. Not exactly. There was only the faintest hint of sound, a slow, shallow breathing, so quiet he wondered for a moment if it was simply the hum of the phone line. "Hello? Can you hear me?" he repeated, leaning closer, as though proximity could pull words from silence. But there was nothing, only that soft, distant breath. After a moment, the line clicked, and the call ended. James lowered the phone, a faint crease forming between his eyebrows. "Probably a wrong number," he murmured, barely loud enough for Lavra to hear. She nodded gently, trusting the explanation, and the house slipped back into its slow, peaceful rhythm. James returned to the tree, Lavra to her quiet tasks, and upstairs, Ellie's humming turned into a soft little song about snowflakes and Christmas morning. Outside, the wind traced its fingertips across the snowy windows, carrying with it the cold breath of winter. Minutes passed, maybe 10, maybe 15. Time moved dreamily through the rooms of the house. And then, just as the calm settled in once more, the phone rang again. Not urgently, not loudly, just precisely the same as before. James looked up again. A slow inhale, a longer exhale. This time, Lavra stepped closer to him as he picked up the receiver. "Hello?" His tone was firmer now, but still controlled. Again, no voice, no words, just that breathing, barely audible, almost careful. James felt a shiver, small and quick, run along the base of his neck. But before he could speak again, the call ended suddenly. A sharp little click that echoed more loudly than it should have in a quiet house. He kept the phone in his hand for a moment, as if unsure whether to place it down or wait for it to ring again. Laura rested a hand lightly on his arm. "It's probably just someone messing around," she said softly. "Kids doing prank calls. You know how it is around the holidays." James nodded, wanting to agree, wanting the moment to be that simple. And so, they went back to their evening. But the peace of before didn't settle quite as easily now. The air felt different, not threatening, not heavy, but touched by something unexplained. A quiet disturbance, a ripple beneath the surface. They didn't yet know that the calls would continue. They didn't know what those breaths truly meant, or how close someone, or something, already was. Upstairs, Ellie set aside her drawing and climbed into bed, pulling a soft blanket over her shoulders. Her eyelids grew heavy as she watched tiny specks of snow drift past her window. Downstairs, the Christmas lights flickered, casting gentle moving shadows across the living room walls. And somewhere in the silence, far from the warmth of the fireplace, another phone call was already forming, a number being dialed, a breath being taken, a presence waiting, not outside, not far away, much, much closer. The cottage stood at the far end of the property, a modest brick house with a sagging roofline, ivy crawling like old veins along its walls. Inside, everything was still. The kind of stillness that exists only in deep winter. The kind that feels almost unnatural. Emma pushed the door open with a soft creak, stepping inside with 2 grocery bags tucked against her coat. The warm air of the cottage brushed her cheeks. A small electric heater hummed softly in the living room. The smell of pine lingered from the decorative wreath her grandmother had hung above the fireplace weeks earlier. "Dad?" she called out. No response. Only the faint ticking of the old wall clock. She set the bags on the table, took off her scarf, and rubbed her chilled hands together. Outside, the wind rolled across the fields in long, low breaths. Snow tapped gently at the window panes. Her father often napped around this time. Maybe he was sleeping, but something felt off, a subtle wrongness, like the air itself was waiting. Emma walked down the short hallway, her boots quiet on the wooden floorboards. She pushed open the bedroom door. Empty. The bed was neatly made, undisturbed. His coat was missing, the heavy one he wore only when he went outside at night to check the animals, though they no longer kept any. They hadn't had livestock in years. Emma frowned slightly. She checked the bathroom, the small laundry room, the back door. Everything locked, everything still. Her father wasn't the type to wander off, and he certainly wouldn't leave without writing a note or telling her, especially not during the icy December nights they had grown used to after the accident that had taken her mother. But maybe he had stepped outside for a moment. Maybe he had heard something, a noise, a branch, an animal. She exhaled slowly, trying to calm the uneasy tightness in her chest. Emma walked to the front window and parted the curtain. Outside, the mist had thickened, drifting across the field like pale smoke. The lamppost at the edge of the property flickered weakly, a small, trembling island of yellow in a sea of darkness. Then she saw it. Footprints. A single trail of deep impressions leading away from the cottage and into the mist. Heavy steps, far heavier than her father's. They began at the very edge of the house near the corner of the roof line, almost directly below where the scratch marks had been found. Emma's breath stilled. "What?" she whispered to herself. The steps stretched outward in a perfectly straight line, vanishing into the white blur beyond the fence. But what unnerved her most was not where they went. It was where they started. So close to the wall, too close, as if someone had climbed down or jumped down. She swallowed hard, the warmth of the cottage suddenly too thin, too fragile to feel safe. Emma grabbed her coat again and stepped outside. The cold bit instantly at her face, the wind pushing thin ribbons of snow against her boots. She followed the footprints carefully. One step, then another. The prints were large, deep, the stride far longer than any normal man's step, and the way they pressed into the snow, almost as if whoever made them carried significant weight. Her pulse quickened. "Dad?" she called out again, but her voice seemed to be swallowed by the mist. Then another shape came into view. Additional footprints, smaller, fresher, her father's. They approached the larger ones, then overlapped, as if he had followed them into the night. Emma's breath trembled in the freezing air. This wasn't normal. Her father would never walk off into the dark, in this cold, for no reason. Not at his age. Not without telling her. The 2 sets of tracks continued side by side for a few meters. Then suddenly, the smaller prints stopped. Just stopped, as if he had been lifted or taken. Emma's throat tightened. Something rustled in the distance, a faint shifting sound like weight pressing down snow, then releasing. Slow, deliberate. She turned instinctively, scanning the fog. "Dad?" Her voice cracked slightly. But the silence that followed was heavier than before. almost thoughtful. A slow dread crept up her spine. She wasn't alone, not out here. With the mist thickening around her, Emma forced herself to move, following the tracks farther than she should have, deeper into the empty winter field. Then, she reached it. A shape, her father's flashlight, lying on the snow. Still warm, still glowing, but no sign of him. Emma crouched and picked it up with shaking fingers. The beam wavered as she shone it around. Nothing, no movement, no figure, not even disturbed branches. Just thick, smothering silence. Then behind her, crunch, a single footstep in the snow. One that wasn't hers. Emma froze. Her breath caught in her chest as she slowly turned her head. And the frame cuts to black. Emma didn't move. For a moment, time itself felt suspended. The mist frozen mid-drift, the wind holding its breath. The world waiting. She turned her head slowly, very slowly, her fingers tightening around the flashlight. But when the beam swept across the field, there was nothing. Only swirling fog and the far-off silhouettes of bare winter trees. Her heartbeat hammered in her ears. She stood perfectly still, listening, waiting for another sound. But the night had returned to silence, as if nothing had ever disturbed it. Emma swallowed and whispered to herself, "Get a grip. It's just the cold, just the dark." But deep down she knew. Something had made that sound. Something large, heavy, close. She took a shaky step backward, then another, until the faint outline of the cottage appeared through the mist. Only when she reached the porch did she feel her legs again weak, trembling beneath her. Back inside, she locked the door with trembling hands, then locked the second latch, then slid the wooden bar into place, though she had never used it before. The cottage felt different now, not warm, not safe. The shadows seemed longer, the quiet deeper, like the house itself was listening. Emma pulled out her phone to call her father, but the screen showed no signal. That was normal out here, but it felt different now. Worse, more final. She tried the landline. Nothing. Just a faint static hum. Her breathing quickened. She stepped into the living room and turned on the main lights. The brightness washed over the furniture-old wooden cabinets, the worn armchair, framed pictures along the mantel. Everything exactly where it should be. Almost. One thing was different. The attic hatch, the small wooden square in the hallway ceiling, it was slightly ajar. Emma froze. Her father never opened it. He hated the attic. Said it was too cold, too dusty, that his knees couldn't handle the ladder anymore. Emma stared at the hatch, her pulse thumping in her throat. Had it always been like that? Maybe she hadn't noticed earlier. Maybe it had shifted with the wind. Tap. A faint sound came from above, like something lightly touching the beams. A slow, dragging scrape. Emma held her breath, her eyes locked on the ceiling. Tap, tap, scrape. It wasn't the house settling. It wasn't the wind. Something was up there. She backed away, step by trembling step, until she reached the kitchen doorway. The flashlight in her hand flickered once, twice before, steadying again. She didn't dare call out. She didn't dare move closer. Instead, she turned on every light in the house, one room at a time. She moved carefully, constantly glancing back at the attic hatch. But the sounds didn't return. Not yet. Emma found her father's old radio on the shelf. She turned it on, hoping for news, music, anything that would break the oppressive silence. Static, a low, wavering hum. Then, for just a second, a voice, indistinct, muffled, like someone speaking through layers of snow. Don't follow tracks. The static swallowed the rest. Emma stepped back, her hand flying to her mouth. Did she hear it correctly? Was it real? Or just her mind scrambling for sense? She turned the dial, moving through stations filled with nothing but winter interference. No signal. No voice again. Her breath trembled as she shut the radio off. She needed help. She needed answers. She needed to know where her father had gone. And yet, a deeper fear gnawed at her. What if he had come back? What if he was in the house? In the attic? Emma forced herself to look at the hallway ceiling again. Still open, still slightly crooked, still waiting. She whispered, barely audible. "Dad?" Silence. The heater hummed. The wind pushed against the windows. A branch tapped the glass. But above her, the attic remained still. For now. Emma stood in the hallway, her eyes fixed on the crooked attic hatch. Her breath rose and fell in uneven waves. The silence above her stretched, long, tense, almost measured. She took one careful step backward, then another. The house felt wrong now, like it was holding its breath with her. Emma reached the living room and gently set her hand on the back of the old armchair. Something solid, familiar, grounding. Her fingers were trembling. She didn't want them to, but they were. She needed to think, to breathe, to anchor herself. She whispered, "Dad, if you're here, please, please say something." Nothing. Only the soft hum of the heater and the faint crackle of the fireplace settling inside its stone frame. But then something changed. A soft, delicate sound emerged from the corner of the room. A rustle, like the brushing of pine needles. Emma slowly turned her head toward the Christmas tree. The lights she'd wrapped around it earlier glowed faintly warm little orbs of yellow and red, casting gentle shadows across the ornaments. One of those ornaments, a small glass bauble shaped like a star, began to sway, only slightly at first, then a little more. Emma's breath hitched. There was no draft in the room, no open window, nothing that should have moved it. She stared, frozen, as another ornament shifted, and another, as if something unseen had passed between the branches. A soft, trembling shiver ran down her spine. "What is happening?" she whispered. The ornaments stilled. The lights flickered once. A brief dimming, as if the power strained under a sudden invisible weight. Then the room fell quiet again. But not empty, not anymore. Emma's gaze drifted back to the hallway, back to the attic hatch, hanging open like a cold mouth in the ceiling. A low creak echoed from above. The wood beams groaned softly, as if something heavy had shifted its weight. Emma felt her pulse throb in her throat. She slowly reached for her father's old flashlight, lying on the table. Her fingers brushed the cold metal. She clicked it on. A narrow, pale beam cut through the dim room. For a moment, she felt a small sense of control return. But then, a single deliberate sound from the attic. Emma flinched. Another tap. Closer. Sharper. Right above the hatch. Her knees weakened. The flashlight trembled in her hand. She stepped backward again, her breath shallow, her mind racing. Was it an animal? A raccoon? A bird? No, no. The steps she heard outside, the footprints, her father's missing tracks. Her thoughts spiraled. Then, scrape. A long, slow dragging sound, as though something was moving across the attic floor, toward the open hatch. Emma's heart pounded so hard she felt it in her fingertips. Scrape, scrape, stop. She didn't dare breathe. The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating. She whispered to herself, "Please, don't come down. Please." But the house answered with nothing, only stillness. And yet she knew, with an icy certainty, that something was waiting just a few feet above her head, watching, listening, learning the sound of her fear. Emma stood completely still, her breath barely leaving her lungs, the pale flashlight beam trembling across the hallway floorboards. The attic had gone quiet again. Too quiet. The kind of silence that didn't feel natural, the kind that felt aware. Emma forced herself to take a step toward the living room, toward the kitchen phone, toward anything that could connect her to the outside world. But before she could move another inch, the heater abruptly shut off. Just died, mid-hum, as if someone had pulled the plug from inside the wall. The sudden silence was sharp, cold, strangely hollow. It felt like the house had exhaled, and then decided not to inhale again. Emma whispered, barely audible, "Please don't do this. Not now." And then the temperature around her began to fall. Not slowly, not like normal winter draft, but suddenly, sharply, like a curtain of cold descending from the ceiling. Her breath fogged in front of her face. The attic. The cold was coming from the attic. Emma wrapped her arms around herself and backed toward the kitchen. The flashlight flickered again, just once but enough to make her flinch. She reached the kitchen phone, lifted the receiver with shaking hands, and pressed her ear to it. Static. Soft. Faint. Then clearer, like a whisper carried on the wires. "Stay inside?" Emma's eyes widened. It wasn't her father's voice. It wasn't any voice she recognized. It was thin, dry, strained, like someone speaking through a mouth that hadn't been used in a very long time. "Don't look up." Emma slapped the phone back down immediately, her hands trembling violently. She didn't know what terrified her more, the words themselves, or the possibility that something was speaking to her through a dead phone line. She stepped away slowly, breathlessly, until she reached the living room again. The flashlight beam shook over the furniture, over the curtains, over the Christmas tree, where something had changed. The tree lights were no longer warm. They were dim, pulsing faintly like a weak heartbeat. And then Emma noticed something else. Under the lowest branches, half hidden in shadow, sat a small object. A shape, square, black, dusty. Emma crouched slowly, every instinct telling her not to, and angled the flashlight. It was her father's old cassette recorder, one he hadn't used in years, one that had been stored away in the attic. The attic. Emma reached out with trembling fingers and touched the recorder. It clicked. It turned on. All by itself. The tape began to spin. Emma's throat tightened. A soft hiss of static filled the room. Then, her father's voice. Weak, tired, barely recognizable. "Emma, if you hear this, don't stay in the house, don't." Static swallowed the rest. Emma covered her mouth with her hand, her vision blurred with panic, confusion, dread. Why would her father record something like this? When? And why hide it in the attic? The tape crackled again. A new voice. Lower, breathier, wrong. "Found you." Emma dropped the recorder. It hit the floor with a hollow thud. And at that exact moment, bang, a violent crash erupted directly above her. The attic floorboards trembled. Dust drifted down, soft as snow. Something heavy was moving. Dragging, pacing, too fast, too strong, too heavy to be human. The attic hatch creaked, a long wooden groan, and the corner of it dipped lower. Emma stumbled backward, the flashlight beam shaking wildly across the walls. No, no, no. Thud. A hand, or something shaped vaguely like one, pressed against the underside of the hatch. Long fingers curled around the wood, pale, veined, wrong. Emma screamed, but her voice died in her throat as the hand slowly retreated, not back into the attic, but toward the far side of the ceiling. Whatever was up there was crawling, fast. It skittered across the beams, over the hallway, toward the kitchen, toward the back of the house, moving with a horrible fluid speed. Emma stumbled into the living room corner, pressing herself behind the old armchair, the flashlight clutched against her chest. The house shook again. Something hit the far wall. Hard. Then again. Faster. Like it was searching the rooms, listening, tracking her movements from above. And then, silence. As sudden as a switch being flipped. Emma didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't dare think. And in that suffocating quiet, she realized something. It wasn't trying to break in. It wanted her to move, to run, to reveal where she was. A slow terror spread across her chest, because something else clicked in her mind. Her father's missing footprints, leading straight out into the mist, and then stopping. Stopping as if he'd been lifted, taken, carried upward. Her father hadn't disappeared into the woods. He had been taken upward, onto the roof, into the attic, where she was now trapped beneath it. A tear slipped down Emma's cheek. Her whisper was so soft, it barely existed. "Dad, what did you see?" Above her, the ceiling creaked. Something was lowering its weight over the living room, slowly, deliberately, and Emma knew it had found her. Emma pressed herself deeper into the shadow behind the old armchair, clutching the flashlight so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The house was silent once more, but it wasn't the calming silence she knew from childhood. It was a listening silence, a waiting silence. Above her, the weight shifted again, slow, careful, deliberate, as if whatever was up there had lowered itself onto elbows and was now crawling across the beams to position directly over her. Emma covered her mouth with both hands. She didn't know if the thing could hear her breathing, but she wasn't going to risk it. She listened. The wind outside whispered against the windows, the night pressing itself against the glass. For a moment, Emma wondered if she could slip out the back door, just run, get to the old neighbor's cottage a few houses down, but she knew better. The creature, presence, whatever it was, had moved with horrifying speed. It crossed the attic in seconds, if she made a sound. A footstep, a breath, a door creak. It would hear. And she wasn't sure she could outrun something that crawled across the ceiling like a shadow with bones. Another soft creak made her body jump. Then, something even worse, whispering. Right above her, not loud, not clear, just a faint murmur, like breath scraping against wood. Words forming halfway, dissolving before they became anything human. It was listening to her, repeating her, mimicking. Emma pressed her forehead against her knees, fighting every instinct screaming at her to run, to make noise, to escape. But she forced herself still. Minutes passed. 10, 20. Time moved like thick syrup. The house stayed unnervingly quiet. Too quiet. Eventually, the weight above her shifted again. But this time, it pulled away, slowly, methodically. The beams creaked softly as it crawled toward the far side of the attic again, moving with a sickening grace, like a predator that had decided to circle around and wait. Emma's pulse hammered in her throat. The second it moved away, she finally allowed herself a small, trembling breath. This was her chance. She rose carefully 1 inch, then another lifting herself from behind the armchair. Her legs felt numb, but she didn't dare let them shake. She looked toward the back of the house, the kitchen, the back door, the only exit that didn't face the front porch where she'd seen that shadow pass earlier. She took one slow step. The floor creaked, a small, sharp sound. Emma froze. Above her, instant movement. It crawled rapidly across the beams, right toward her position. Emma stepped back behind the armchair, tears flooding her eyes as the creature halted above her again. It was testing her, listening for her, tracking her every shift of weight. She waited until the crawling sounds faded again, settling somewhere near the far end of the house. Another chance. A quieter one. This time, Emma took off her slippers. The floorboards were old. Shoes made noise. Bare feet might not. She swallowed hard and whispered so softly it barely left her lips. Okay, steady, slow. She moved again. Her foot touched the cold floor. Soft, silent. Another step. Quiet. She kept her eyes on the kitchen doorway. The flashlight pointed toward the floor, so it wouldn't cast shadows on the ceiling. Every few seconds, she stopped, listening, waiting. Above her, the creature shifted occasionally, but it wasn't accelerating toward her. Not yet. Finally, Emma reached the kitchen. She exhaled shakily, then covered her mouth immediately, terrified she'd been too loud. The back door stood a few feet away. A snow-dusted window showed only darkness. Outside, the world was silent. Emma reached for the door handle. Her fingers brushed the cold metal, when suddenly a soft sound reached her ear. Not from the attic, not from the hall. From outside, on the other side of the back door. A slow, dragging sound, like footsteps through thick snow, getting closer, closer, stopping right behind the door. Emma's breath trembled. Then 3 slow knocks. Not violent, not frantic. Almost polite. Knock, knock. Emma staggered backward, slamming into the counter. Her heart thrashed wildly. Someone was outside, or something. Something that had no reason to knock gently, unless it wanted her to open the door willingly. Emma forced herself not to make a sound. The house held its breath with her. Snow crackled outside as the weight shifted again. The figure on the other side moved, leaning closer, until its shadow stretched faintly across the frosted window pane. A tall shape. Too tall. Too thin. Like long limbs bent at impossible angles. Emma covered her mouth. No. No. The shadow paused. Then a whisper. Faint, crackling through the door like icy breath. Open up. Her blood ran cold. The same voice, the same whisper, the same sound she heard through the attic, through the phone line, through the recorder. It wasn't outside, it wasn't upstairs, it was everywhere. And now, it wanted in. Emily froze. The scraping above her head had changed. No longer a shuffle. No longer the weight of someone crawling. It was rhythmic, a slow, deliberate sound. Slide, stop, slide, stop, slide, stop, as if something or someone was inching its way across the attic floor, straight toward the spot directly above her bed. Emily's breath grew shallow. She pulled the blanket higher, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. Down the hall, her father's footsteps echoed, steady, tired, unaware. He stopped outside her door. Emily? He whispered softly. Can't sleep? She swallowed, her voice trembling. Dad, he's still up there. Her father exhaled, the kind of exhale that hides fear. Stay here, he murmured. He turned the handle, stepped inside, and closed the door gently behind him. The room dimmed again, the small lamp casting long, nervous shadows across the walls. He stood beneath the attic hatch, listening. At first, only the hum of the heater. Then, right above him, he looked at Emily. She looked back. Another tap. Closer. He reached into his pocket. Emily saw his fingers trembling slightly as he pulled out the old wooden attic pole. Whatever's up there, he whispered. "I'm ending this tonight." He hooked the pole into the latch. The hatch creaked. Dust sifted down, drifting through the lamplight like falling ashes. Another sound rose from the attic. Not movement, not scraping. Breathing, slow, deep, measured. Her father froze mid-pull, eyes widening. "That's not an animal," he whispered. Emily felt every inch of her skin tense. Her heartbeat drummed in her ears. Her father steadied himself, lifted the pole again. Then the attic hatch slammed from the inside, violently. So hard the lamp flickered. Emily screamed. Her father jumped back, dropping the pole. Silence followed. An enormous, suffocating silence. He stepped toward her, kneeling by the bed. "Emily," he whispered, "get your shoes on." Quietly. "Why?" she gasped. He didn't answer, but she saw the truth in his eyes. He didn't know if the thing in the attic was a man or something else. He only knew they needed to leave. Emily slid out of bed, hands shaking. Her father grabbed her coat, then his. They moved toward the door, slow, careful, steps muffled by the carpet. Halfway down the hallway, the attic hatch clicked. Both of them froze. The hatch slowly, painfully slowly, opened. Just an inch, then another. A soft thud landed on the attic ladder. A footstep. Bare, heavy, deliberate. Her father put an arm in front of Emily, shielding her. The second footstep followed, then a third. Descending. And then a voice, a whisper. Dry, weak, too close. "Don't leave. Not yet." Emily's lungs locked. Her father pushed her backward, gripping her hand tightly. "Emily, run." They bolted. Down the stairs. Across the narrow hallway. Past the living room. Past the window glowing with the faint shimmer of Christmas lights still hanging outside. Behind them, the footsteps hit the floor. Slow, steady, coming after them. They reached the front door. Her father fumbled with the lock, the metal cold under his shaking hands. "Come on," he muttered. The footsteps grew louder. Plastic ornaments rattled on the small Christmas tree. As something brushed past it. "Dad, please open it." Emily cried. The lock finally turned. They burst outside into the freezing night air. Their breath scrambled into mist as they ran across the yard, slipping in the thin layer of snow. But when they reached the gate, Emily stopped. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. The house behind them, its windows, glowed softly with warm yellow light. But in the upstairs window, the attic window, a figure stood. Tall, still, silhouetted against the dim lamp, watching them. Not moving, not hiding, just watching. Her father grabbed her arm. "Don't look. Keep moving." They reached the car. The engine struggled in the cold, coughing, whining. "Come on, come on," her father begged. Inside the house, a shadow shifted. The figure stepped away from the attic window. Then, the front door of the house creaked open. Emily gasped. Something stepped onto the porch. Bare feet on snow. Her father slammed the car into gear. The tires spun in the icy slush, then finally caught. The car sped down the dark country road, leaving the house shrinking into the distance. But Emily couldn't stop shaking, because in that brief moment on the porch, she had seen the figure clearly. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a burglar. It was a man with a gaunt, hollow face, eyes impossibly wide and unblinking, as if he hadn't slept in years, and his shirt had been torn at the shoulder, as if something had been clawing at him from the inside. And for the first time, Emily realized the attic man hadn't been hiding from them. He'd been hiding from something else. Something still inside that house. something that had never shown itself. Yet, the car moved deeper into the countryside, its headlights carving two trembling beams through the icy darkness. Emily's breathing had steadied a little, but her heart still thudded painfully in her chest. Her father gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, eyes locked on the road. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Only the sound of the tires gliding over the thin snow and the faint hum of the heater filled the silence. Finally, her father exhaled. "Emily," he said quietly, "I've been keeping something from you." Her stomach tightened. She turned toward him. What do you mean?" He swallowed. "That wasn't the first time I heard something up there." Emily stiffened. "I heard footsteps 2 nights ago," he continued, his voice low and tired. "I went up to check, but I didn't see anything. Just cold air, dust, old boxes." He paused, but when I came down, the hatch closed on its own. Emily's breath caught. "Why didn't you tell me?" She whispered. "I didn't want to scare you. And I kept telling myself maybe I imagined it. The holidays, the stress, being alone in that house since your mother passed." His voice cracked slightly. Emily reached out and gently placed a hand on his arm. The car kept rolling through the dark, empty countryside. Then, a strange sound emerged from behind them. A soft, distant creak. Emily froze, slowly turning her head toward the rear window. Nothing, just the dark fields. Her father noticed her staring. "Hey," he whispered, "it's okay. We're safe now." But even as he said it, he checked the mirror again. They drove another 4 miles before reaching the old service station, the only one open this late. Its fluorescent lights hummed in the cold air. Her father parked near the side of the building, far from the dark wooded area that loomed on the other end. "Wait here," he said gently. "I'll call the police." Emily watched him jog inside, his breath drifting behind him. For a moment, she allowed herself to settle, to breathe, to feel the warmth of the car heater washing over her. But then she heard it. Tap, inside the car. She jolted upright. Her breath clouded the window as she leaned forward. Silence. Then tap, tap, this time from the roof. Her pulse thundered in her ears. "Dad," she whispered under her breath, though he couldn't hear her. She reached for the door handle and froze. A thin line of dust fell from the fabric above her. Not from the roof, from the car's ceiling. As if something was moving, crawling, between the metal frame, slowly, deliberately. Her breath shook. She leaned forward, eyes fixed on the roof, and then something pressed down from inside the ceiling panel, bending it outward for half a second. Emily slapped her hand over her mouth to keep from screaming. Outside, her father stepped out of the station, talking to an officer on the phone, still unaware. The ceiling panel relaxed again. Silence, long, heavy silence. Then, a whisper seeped through the car's interior. Same voice, same rasp, same impossible nearness. "He wasn't hiding from me." Emily's eyes widened. "He was hiding from you." The car door opened suddenly. Emily screamed, but it was only her father. He rushed inside. "Emily? What happened?" She shook her head rapidly, pointing upward, but when he looked, nothing. Just the ceiling panel, still, perfectly normal. Her father grabbed her shoulders. "Emily, listen to me. Police are on their way. We're going to stay right here, okay? Right here in the light." She nodded, trembling, staring at the ceiling, even as she tried to focus on him. Minutes passed. Slow, heavy. Then the officer her father had called pulled up in a marked car. A middle-aged constable stepped out, tightening his scarf against the cold. He listened to her father, nodding, glancing at Emily with calm, steady eyes. "All right," he said gently. "I'll go check your property. Stay here, both of you. Don't follow." He drove off toward their home. Emily pressed her forehead lightly against the cold window, watching the patrol car leave. And for the first time, she felt something new. Not fear, not shock. Dread. A deep, quiet dread that settled in her stomach. She whispered, "Dad, what if it wasn't a man?" Her father stared at her for a long, silent moment. Then he looked toward the road where the officer had vanished. "I don't know," he admitted softly. "But whatever it was, it's not staying in our home another night." 20 minutes passed. Then headlights appeared far down the road. The patrol car returned, but it was different now. Slower, more careful, as if the driver was thinking hard. The constable stepped out, walking toward them with a grim expression. "Sir," he said quietly to her father. "Emily, I'm going to be honest with you." He hesitated. There was no sign of forced entry, no footprints in the snow, no disturbed insulation in the attic. Emily's stomach dropped. "But," the officer added, lowering his voice, "there was one thing." Her father tensed. "In the attic, on the far side, behind your old storage boxes." The dust was disturbed in a very strange pattern. "Pattern?" Emily asked, barely above a whisper. The constable nodded slowly. Long streaks, as if someone had been dragging their fingers across the boards. He paused. But the streaks weren't leading toward the hatch. Emily frowned. "They were leading? Away?" she whispered. "No," the officer replied gently. "They were circling." Emily's blood ran cold. The constable continued. "And in the center of the circle," he stopped again, choosing his words. "There was a spot on the floorboards, a perfectly round patch where the dust was cleared away, as if someone had been sitting there." Emily's breath caught. "Sitting," she echoed faintly. "For a long time," the constable said. "Days, maybe more." Her father paled. The officer's voice softened further. "And whoever or whatever was sitting there was facing the hatch. The entire time." Emily's hands trembled uncontrollably. The constable finished. It wasn't waiting to come down. It was waiting for something to come up. A deep quiet settled over the small service station lot. Just the wind sweeping across the empty fields, and the faint buzz of the neon lights above them. Emily stared at the constable, her breath thin and shaky. Her father's voice broke the silence. "Officer," he said softly, "if it wasn't hiding from us, then what was it waiting for?" The constable hesitated. He glanced back toward the long, dark road they'd come from. Then he spoke quietly. "I don't know, but whatever was up there, it wasn't behaving like someone who wanted to escape." He looked at Emily. "It was behaving like someone guarding something." Emily swallowed. "Guarding? What?" The constable exhaled slowly. "I can't tell you that, but I can tell you this." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I've seen break-ins, squatters, drifters. This wasn't any of those." He paused. "And whatever sat in that attic, sat there for a very, very long time." Her father looked toward the car, then back at the officer. "We're not going back tonight," he said decisively. "We'll stay anywhere else. A hotel, a friend's. I don't care. We're not returning." The constable nodded. "I think that's wise." He walked them back toward their vehicle, speaking softly, almost gently, like someone escorting a shaken family after a storm. "Try to get some rest," he said. "Leave the lights on when you arrive. Call if anything changes." He paused before stepping away. "And Emily?" he added quietly. She looked up at him. "If you hear anything again, don't assume it's outside." Emily didn't ask what he meant. She didn't want to know. They left the service station and headed toward the nearest Innis Small, quiet lodge by the main road, its windows glowing with warm, amber light. Inside, the lobby was decorated with simple Christmas garlands. A soft instrumental carol drifted through the speakers, gentle and calming. For the first time in hours, Emily felt a sliver of warmth. They checked into a room with 2 beds. Her father locked the door twice, then placed a chair under the handle. Emily sat on her bed, wrapped in a hotel blanket, staring at the patterned wallpaper. Her father knelt beside her. "We're safe now," he whispered. She nodded slowly, but deep down, she wasn't sure. Hours passed. The clock on the wall ticked softly. Emily eventually lay down, her breathing steadying in the dim golden glow of the lamp. Her father fell asleep in the chair by the door, arms crossed, head tilted forward. The heater hummed. Outside, a gentle snow had begun to fall, soft and quiet. For a moment, a rare, delicate moment, the world felt peaceful. Emily's eyes fluttered. Her thoughts drifted. Sleep began to wrap around her like a warm blanket. And then, tap, very soft, on the hotel ceiling. Her eyes snapped open. She didn't move, didn't breathe. She stared upward. Tap, tap, followed by a faint scraping, a slow shifting of weight, the sound of something adjusting its position, directly above her. Her throat tightened. No, not again, not here. She reached out, gently shaking her father's arm. "Dad," she whispered. His eyes opened instantly, sensing the fear in her voice. "What is it?" Emily pointed upward. He listened. Silence. And then a soft, drawn-out exhale, like someone lying on the floor above them, pressing their face to the boards, breathing downward. Her father rose from the chair slowly. He didn't speak. He didn't panic. He simply placed a hand on Emily's back and guided her toward the door. They left the room quietly, moving down the hallway to the lobby, a place with brighter lights, open space, security cameras. The receptionist looked up, startled. "Is everything all right?" Emily's father cleared his throat. "We'd like a different room," he said gently. "Top floor, if possible." The receptionist blinked. "But you're already on the top floor." He stopped mid-sentence when he saw Emily's face, the pale terror in her eyes. He didn't ask again. He silently handed them keys to a room on the opposite side of the building, near the staff offices and under brighter lighting. They slept lightly, barely, but the night passed. No taps, no scraping, no whispers. When the pale winter sun began to rise, Emily felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. They drove away from the inn slowly, back toward their home. Now under the supervision of the police, 2 officers met them outside. One approached Emily with a small, kind smile. "We checked again this morning," she said. "Nothing in the attic. No one in the house." She paused. "But we did find something unusual." Emily's heart tightened. What did you find?" The officer lifted a small evidence bag. Inside, a piece of old, torn fabric, faded blue. A shirt sleeve. The exact sleeve Emily had seen on the figure standing in their attic window. Her father swallowed hard. The officer continued. "We found it in the crawl space behind the attic wall. There were marks on the interior beams, long scratches, deep ones, as if someone had been trying to climb or trying to pull themselves out." Emily shivered. "But," the officer added, "there's no sign they ever made it through." Emily's father frowned. "So, whatever was in our attic, it never left?" The officer looked at the house behind them. "We believe it left a long time ago." Emily's stomach dropped. "A long time ago?" she whispered. The officer nodded quietly. The dust in that crawl space was layered, years old, maybe decades. Emily's breath caught. Her father stepped beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. The officer finished softly. "Whatever you saw that night, we don't think it was living." Emily's spine tingled. A cold December breeze swept across the yard, stirring the frost on the window panes and the forgotten Christmas decorations that still hung quietly from the eaves. For a long moment, she stared at the attic window, the same window where the figure once stood. The glass reflected nothing now, nothing but winter sky. That night, Emily and her father stayed with relatives. They didn't return to the house until after the holidays. Even then, the attic remained empty, but sometimes, in the quiet of a winter night, Emily would catch herself listening for a tap, a scrape, a whisper, and though she never heard it again, the memory lingered, softly, quietly, like forgotten footprints in the dust, a reminder that on one cold Christmas, something had been waiting in the dark, waiting for someone, waiting for her, and whatever it was, it had never truly left.